Hi, my name is Eric Sanchez. In this video, I will be reacting to the article Shakespeare in the Bush by Laura Bohannon. This article pretty much focuses on culture, it focuses on worldview, and also how people from different backgrounds understand meaning in different ways. In this video, I will summarize the main idea of the article, explain how worldview affects cultural interpretation, identify an ethnocentric bias, reflect on cultural norms, and connect the story to my own culture, and also explain what I learned about intercultural communication. Um, this article shows that misunderstandings between cultures usually happen not because people are wrong, but I feel because they see the world differently depending on where they where they come from. Um, Shakespeare in the Bush is about Laura Bohannon, an anthropologist who was living with the Tiv people in West Africa. While living there, she spent a good amount of time learning about their traditions, their beliefs, and social rules. One day, she decided to tell the Tiv elders the story of Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Um, she believed that Hamlet was a story about human nature and that people everywhere will understand it the same way. As she told the story, the Tiv people kept interrupting her, uh, and they corrected her and explained what they believed was really happening in the story. Their explanations were based on their own beliefs about family, about marriage, and about death. Um, at first, Bohanna felt frustrated because she believed that they were like misunderstanding the story. But however, by the end, she realized that the thief people were not confused. They were just interpreting the story through their own culture. And then pretty much this main idea of the article is that meaning is shaped by culture, and stories are not understood the same way across different worldviews. Um, this article clearly shows how worldview affects how people understand meaning. A worldview is how people see the world based on their culture, their beliefs, and life experiences. Um, I will say one example from the article is the ghost in Hamlet. Bohannon believed the ghost was Hamlet's dead father returning to speak to him. But however, the thief people did not believe that dead people could return in that way. They thought that the ghost must be a sign, an omen, or something related to witchcraft. I will say probably another example is Hamlet's mother. In Western culture, many people believe she acted wrongly by marrying her husband's brother too quickly. The Tea people believe she acted correctly in their culture because a widow is pretty much expected to marry a close family member to protect the family and keep stability. Yeah, these people, I'm sorry, these examples show that people do not interpret actions or stories in a neutral way. Instead, worldviews act like a filter that shapes meaning. The Tiff people were not misunderstanding Hamlet, they were just interpreting it based on their cultural values. Um, this idea is supported by Hofstede's insight. According to Hofstede, culture influences how people think, how people communicate, and understand social behaviors. Different cultures have different values related to family, authority, and social responsibility. Um, Hofstede explains that people grew up learning what is considered normal in the culture, and those lessons shape how they understand the world. This helps explain why the Thief people focus so strongly on family roles and social rules when listening to Hamlet. Hofstede's research supports Bohannon's experience by showing that cultural shapes perception. People do not simply hear a story, they interpret it based on what their culture has taught them. I will say that one ethnocentric bias in this article comes from Bohanna herself. At the beginning of the story, she believed her interpretation of Hamlet was the correct one. She assumed, she assumed that Shakespeare's meaning was universal. When the thief people would explain the story differently, she she felt frustrated and believed they were wrong. Uh, I will say this is ethnocentrism because she judged their understanding using her own cultural standards. And her worldview caused her to assume that Western ideas about ghosts, marriage, family were more accurate. Later, she realized that Thief people's explanations made sense within their culture, and I just think that this bias matters because it shows how even educated people can misunderstand others when they assume their culture is the standard. Um, the story challenges the idea that cultural norms are universal truths. Bohanna learned that her beliefs were not natural or universal, they were cultural. The Thief people had different rules about marriage, family, and death, but those rules worked for them. Their culture was not wrong, just different. This shows that what feels normal in one culture may feel strange in another. The article clearly challenges that belief that one culture values are the best or the only correct way to live. In my culture, for example, celebrating birthdays with cake, gifts, and parties is very common. Most people see this as a happy and important tradition. However, someone from another culture might see birthdays as unnecessary or confusing. They might not understand why age is celebrated or why so much attention is given to one person. Just like the TIFF people judge Hamlet's actions based on their culture, outsiders will judge this tradition based on theirs. This shows how cultural norms can be misunderstood when viewed through a different worldview. Um, I will say one of the best practices for cross-cultural communication will be to listen first and avoid assuming things, uh, and also like avoid assuming that your way is the only correct way. In Shakespeare in the Bush, Bohannon learned more once she stopped correcting the thief people and actually started listening to their explanations. Uh, and their explanations help her understand their culture better. Hofstede Insights also supports the idea by showing that understanding cultural differences helps reduce misunderstandings. By being patient, open minded, and respectful, improves communication between cultures by so much. Um, I would probably say I have seen cultural misunderstandings happen when people interpret behavior differently. For example, some people see direct communication as honest, while others see it as rude. This is similar to what happened in Shakespeare in the Bush. Hanan and the thief people heard the same story but completely understood it different because of their worldviews. In both cases, the misunderstanding was not caused by bad intentions, but by the differential or by the by the different cultural perspectives. Um, I will say that the most important lesson I learned from this article is that worldview strongly affects how people understand meaning and communicate. In Shakespeare in the Bush and Hofstede Insights, they both showed that cultural shapes perception, like I said before, and recognizing this helps reduce judgment and improve intercultural communication. Um, I'll probably also say that this article taught me that effective communication across cultures requires, I will say, humility, patience, and respect for different ways of seeing the world. That's it. Thank you so much.